Go. Awesome. Well, welcome everybody. Glad you're here. Today we're talking about when does an enterprise become a social enterprise? And I'm really looking forward to this discussion. We are planning to make this interactive, so I hope you've come with your questions and your comments and your thoughts on this topic, because this is a group discussion. If you're willing to participate, we'd love to chat with you. Before I begin, I just want to bear with me. I just want to acknowledge that the land on which we gather has been and still is the traditional territory of several Indigenous nations, including the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Wendat, the Métis, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Since time immemorial, numerous Indigenous nations and Indigenous peoples have lived and passed through this territory. We recognize that this territory is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Treaty and the Two-Row Wampum Treaty, which emphasizes the importance of joint stewardship, peace, and respectful relationships. Sheridan affirms it as our collective responsibility to honor and respect those who have gone before us, those who are here, and those who have yet to come. We are grateful for the opportunity to be working and living on this land. So thanks so much for being here today. If you've come to us, you've probably come to us through the social media channels or through different posts that we've had, but I'm not sure how familiar you are with EDGE, so I thought I'd start off by just sharing a little bit about what EDGE is about. We are the Impact Entrepreneurship Hub at Sheridan College in Mississauga, Oakville, and Brampton in the west end of the GTA, the Greater Toronto area. And our focus at this hub is helping people who want to make an impact in the world through business or through a nonprofit. So we really combine entrepreneurship and impact entrepreneurship to help make a more equitable and sustainable world. And we do that through 3 programs that we run, primarily. Explore, which is really for the students and for anyone who's really curious about what entrepreneurship is and how they could become a change maker using an entrepreneurial mindset. Then there's Leap, which is for aspiring founders with ideas who want to explore how they could work that into a business model or an organization, a nonprofit organization. And within the LEAP, there's another program called the Social Impact Catalyst by RBC Ventures, and that is a very more focused on youth and social impact, so letting young entrepreneurs, students, high school students, college and university students all try to figure out how they could take their ideas for impacting the world in a greater way through their business or through their idea. And then finally, there's Rise, which is a program for people who are at the point of starting to drive revenue in their business. So they've done their research. They are now verifying their business models, their revenue models, through conversations, through sales conversations, through doing some marketing and starting to get a sense of whether or not that is going to play out in the field. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speaker, who is Mark Rodford. And he is a really awesome serial entrepreneur who, bear with me, I've got to undo my screen and all my windows are different. So there we go. Mark Rodford is a serial entrepreneur with a background in social enterprise, social entrepreneurship, and impact models. I know he's pretty excited to be here. Mark has been working with EDGE since September in our Rise program, working with our ventures who are starting to scale up and drive revenue. And we thought we'd have a fun conversation with people today about when a business or an enterprise becomes a social enterprise. There's a lot of talk about social enterprise today, and so we thought it might be a fun conversation, a way to sort of explore the topic of social enterprise and how that impacts on business today. But before we do that, Mark, why don't you tell me a little bit about your background? Tell us a little bit about your background and your entrepreneurial story.
Um, okay, my entrepreneurial story. My entrepreneurial story probably started when I was 8, and it wasn't really entrepreneurial, but it was definitely social. I organized my entire school when I was in grade 4 to um, collect the UPC codes on all the packages for everything, because at the time, my aunt, who was a nurse, if we got 1,000 of them, we could this woman that she worked with could have a half an hour free on dialysis. It was this promo at the time, and so I organized my school, and I just got a firsthand lesson in organization and the power of what happens when people can come together with a shared common vision. And through there, I'd always been involved with uh, just different community oriented and oftentimes organizational or business oriented ventures. So a lot of environmental angles, a lot of inclusion angles. Once I got into the self-employment world, I started I started a company that made naturopathic pet products, and we used our main supply was bycatch from the fishing industry, because they have a whole bunch of things from that get caught when they're fishing for cod or salmon, but that normally would get thrown away. So we wanted to make use of that excess and kind of decrease the environmental footprint of the fishing industry, which we did do. And then when I moved back, I live in the Guelph area. When I moved back to the Guelph area, we were kind of short on a community hub for everybody to congregate at, and so I opened a place that had kind of a community focus on it. Again, with it was a vegetarian vegan place, so we'd be in like a lower footprint on the environment. And it was really a place of inclusion where people could get job skills. A lot of people entering the industry for the first time. Some barriers to employment was big on our list as well, and it meandered through that kind of community-oriented focus. I've been on a lot of boards, a lot of community-operated things, trying to get not-for-profits and governments to work differently together. So I'm also I have the privilege of working with at Sheridan now, which is fantastic. It's such a kick to work with all of these entrepreneurs who have brilliant ideas that I'm sure are going to change the world. And to walk with them a bit on their journey is fantastic. I also am part of an Encompass, which is a consulting company out of Winnipeg, Manitoba, and we're trying to get governments and not-for-profits to think about funding in a different way. And we're trying to get them away from funding, which is a very colonial approach to money, and get them back into outcomes purchasing. So outcomes purchasing is a really excellent way to get not-for-profits in an entrepreneurial frame of mind, where the government and the not-for-profit agree to a certain outcome at the beginning, and then the not-for-profit goes away, sets up a whole enterprise, and the government pays them when they get over a certain threshold, whatever the outcome is. So the easy example is that the governments spend about $50 billion procuring things. They want to build a bridge, and Lisa's a bridge builder. And so I, as the government, go to Lisa and say, Lisa, I will give you $10 million to build this bridge. And Lisa's like, okay, government, go away. Talk to me in a year and a half. Lisa goes away. She gets money from maybe investors and builds the bridge to the specifications. And once the bridge gets built to the specifications, the government signs a check for Lisa for $10 million. And we're trying to get non-for-profits under that same umbrella of procurement. So one of the organizations that inspired Encompass to form into its own entity was a thing called Aki Energy, and they install geothermal heating systems on houses on indigenous reserves. Most of the heating is electrical. It's baseboard heating. It's super expensive. like $1,000 a month
Hmm.
expensive. It's very, very, very. It's A, it's electric, which is super inefficient, and B, it's remote. So the transmission the transmission fees are extraneous. So Aki Energy started. It's a great company. It is all the geothermal systems are installed, sold, and maintained by Indigenous people who previously had barriers to employment. They got the Manitoba Hydro to front the money. So every time they install a heating system, Manitoba Hydro gives Aki Energy $20,000 up front, so everything's all paid for. Once it's installed, the bills go down by 50%, which is unbelievable. What Manitoba Hydro then does is say the bill is now $500, they charge $250 more, so $750. And that extra $250 goes to finance the $20,000 that is
Love it.
put. Yeah, it's great. It's great.
So
And so the
amazing.
government is still saving money. They're still saving $250 a month. There's people being employed. So the people who are working in these businesses, maybe they were costing, because of support programs, they might have been costing the government $30,000, $35,000, $40,000 a person because they were on like a social assistance plan, and now those same people are making $40,000 a year. So they've converted into taxpayers, which also makes the government happy. And that's all. And that doesn't include the loaded rate to maintain people in the programs as well. So it's a really interesting way to start thinking about how can we be doing things differently. And we got piles of examples and different organizations that we're working with. We work a lot in homelessness right now, and that is, again, people who experience homelessness access government at the most expensive levels. We did a study and took 100 homeless people, and 100 homeless people cost just emergency services, the courts, emergency services, fire, hospitals, emergency rooms, $18 million for 100 people.
Crazy.
It was $18.2 million, $182,000 per person we looked at, right? And so we're just saying to the government now, listen, we'll take 100 people, we'll provide them housing. Don't worry about how we're going to do it. We'll just provide them housing. And if we decrease how much they access the government by half, that's $9 million. You give us $6 or $7 million, we'll continue to house them and take care of them and whatever need they have, and you save the $2 or $3 million off the top. Now, that looks good on paper, but it's a completely different paradigm, but trying to get people to think differently about how we approach business and what we can do socially in that business environment is kind of where we're putting our shoulders into trying to make this effort. Now, okay, go ahead, Lisa. You have a great question.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so, and this is the fun part about doing impact work. There's a lot of, everybody has a business focus, but we're all in this together. We live on the same planet. We live in these same communities. There's this great African proverb that says a parent is only as happy as their saddest child. And I that really works, like it really gravitates to me, because I think that even as neighbors, even as co-workers, even as people that are moving through this world at the same time, we are kind of subject to each other, and we're only as good as the people we have around us. So it's in our best interest to make sure that we're all cared for in one way, shape, or form. And I think that having this kind of impact focus and in whatever our ventures are makes a huge difference in terms of how we can move the yardsticks for everyone.
I love it. You have done so much, Mark.
It keeps me out of trouble. My mother always told me to stay out of trouble. So.
You've run the spectrum. You've run the gamut from sort of the basic community building environment through to these sort of really new and forward thinking ways of doing things. So, okay, I'm going to back up a little bit though. We're talking today about social enterprise. So I need a clear definition. What is a social enterprise?
Well, yeah. I wish Marisol, I don't know if anybody has had the opportunity to meet Marisol. She's a part of the Edge team. She's brilliant. I've been here since September. She started maybe a few months before I did. And she's on the learning education, trying to get some pedagogy around how do we define this, and sometimes she's in a good mood and sometimes she's not, depending on trying to define it. But it's elusive because each of our focus on the social side of things can be so different. On the business side of things, are you making money or are you not making money? Profit loss. Mm-hmm. And that is a pretty linear way to look at things. But once we get onto the impact side, the social side of things, there's so many different ways that people are trying to change on the social side of things. So, Lisa has a company and she's trying to reduce barriers to employment for new Canadians who maybe have immigrated from another country. I'm on the environmental side of things, so I'm just trying to decrease people's footprint on how they're impacting the planet. And so just for those two business foci, you could see how one measurement system probably wouldn't work socially to evaluate each on how they're making progress. At the end of the day, very simply, it's your total outcomes of everything you do minus what you would have done normally. And if there's a difference, you're making an impact. How you go about doing that is a completely different frame of reference. You see it a lot on the not-for-profit side of things, who are getting funding models. A lot of the funding would come through granting bodies or government agencies, and when they do that, they have a very specific way to measure their progress and outcomes, which is defined in the beginning. When you get on the entrepreneur side of things, we're in business and we have to make sure we're still in business next year. So we need to make sure that profit and loss is cared for. But then what's your particular emphasis and how do we define those things? Or are we doing are you in a purpose-driven business? This is where Marisol and her focus on trying to get some more categories that we can work with and define ourselves, because it's important that in the beginning and as we proceed that we have some definitions about what does progress mean on the social side of things. Are you a purpose-driven business? Are you a social enterprise, in which case we've got some theory of change things that we need to think about while we're working through that? Or are you an entrepreneurial nonprofit, which is what we're trying to doing on the Encompass group that I work with, is how can we convince how can we get not-for-profits to think more entrepreneurially, because a lot of not-for-profits are subject to their funding. If the funding dries up or they have a government change or whatever the case may be, all of a sudden that not-for-profit who's probably doing really great work doesn't really exist anymore. So how can we go about putting some structures in place so we understand that, okay, your business is doing great, and now how do we move the yardsticks forward on the social focus that you have for your organization or company?
So let me just be clear if I heard you correctly. One type of enterprise is a purpose-driven business. That would be kind of like you have an overarching purpose, but you're still driving profit, like you're still building an empire kind of thing, perhaps.
Right. Yeah. So
am I right about that?
Yes,
and then number two would be the social enterprise.
Yep. Go ahead.
Number two would be the social enterprise, which is where you're purpose driven, like the first type, only maybe reinvesting most of the profit back into the business. And then number three would be, what did you call the enterprising not-for-profit?
Entrepreneurial nonprofit.
Entrepreneurial not-for-profit. Okay. So if those are the three categories, I mean, those are quite distinct, right?
Yes. And again, and I acknowledge too that they're distinct, but there might be some fuzziness in there as well. That you might have an organization who morphs from one to the other, or has aspects depending on if you have, say, different business units in your organization. Some of them might be purpose driven, and you might have some offshoot that's a social enterprise of some description, right? I would say that. So for my first restaurant that I opened, we were a purpose-driven business. We were a people, profit, planet business before the 3 Ps were even delineated. Well, you know, we were working for like no barriers to inclusion. We wanted a small environmental footprint because we knew that if we were a wildly popular place, we didn't want to have a huge impact on the planet, but we still needed to obviously pay our rent and pay our employees and get all our bills squared away. Social enterprises, and there's lots of those out there as well. Like Aki Energy is a perfect example of a social enterprise. They actually have started up a number of businesses, different businesses, and they're all socially focused. Some of them you can't get hired unless you don't have a driver's license. In Manitoba, where this business operates, 83% of all jobs require a driver's license. So they hire people who don't have a driver's license, and part of your employee contract is they work with you to get your driver's license, which is great. And for some people who haven't spent a lot of time in a formal education environment, that, you know, it's a process that they go through that's very important. They have another organization, and they won't hire you unless you have they'll only hire people with a criminal record. So again, the barrier to employment, if you're just getting out of the prison system, it's very difficult. It's a huge barrier to employment. So they have set a whole company up where they get you deinstitutionalized because you might have been in the prison system for a long time, and they give you some skills in terms of the labor force, so that when you move out of the social enterprise that they operate, you can have something on your resume that means you're trained and you have a sense of what it means to operate in a work environment.
We have an alumni member at Edge, Ryan Knight, who started an enterprise with a similar purpose.
And that's a great organization, and he's killing it. It's and he has these great people, barriers to employment, and he details cars, but he comes to you to do it.
That's right.
It's a great organization.
Yeah.
And so again, so just to keep with that example, he could have just, hey, I want to start a car detailing company, and it'd be a great business, you know. But it's like, oh, hey, but you know, I can
make an impact with this.
Yeah, I can look at this a little bit differently. Work with a group of people who might need some support in one way or the other, and still have a great business and have a social impact while we're doing it. Brilliant. Can't go wrong.
So, I mean, those are exceptional examples. There's a lot of businesses that would call themselves social impact organizations that maybe don't have that clear a purpose, or that heart-rending of a purpose. So are they still a social enterprise or a social impact purpose-driven business?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think that we're going to see some more impact washing maybe happening as time goes forward.
It feels that way a little.
Like you see it with greenwashing, you see it with pink washing. During like Breast Cancer Awareness Month, that happens. And I'm always the companies, major companies have things, usually they refer to it as their CSR, their customer, their social responsibility. And it often comes out of their marketing department, which I find a little frustrating, because then it's an angle. It's not like there's two people in their mailroom who come up with a need in their community, and they organize the people in their company to go satisfy the need in the community, and then the company finds out about it. It's like, hey, you know, this is a great story to tell the world. These people in the mailroom have really made a huge difference. They're like, no, how can we make more? Like, you know, it seems something a little bit almost untoward about how they approach it.
And I guess if it's driven from marketing, for sure it has that feel. But I mean, I think as you know, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs in Edge, but also outside of Edge. And it seems like so many business people have a heart for their community in some way and are trying to contribute, maybe just not at this really clearly defined model, right? So
yeah, absolutely. And
where do they fall in?
This is where, so, you know, again, in our, you know, in terms of business practices, we spent, in all the companies, we spent all of our money unless we absolutely couldn't, because you still have to pay your hydro bill, which is usually a major corporation of some description. We spent 98% of our money in small and independent business, right? Which in and of itself has a social angle. 86% of Canadians are employed by small and independent business.
Yeah.
Right. So
other than government, if you take government out.
Fair.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Right. So we are literally employing each other, our neighbors, the people that we're riding the bus with, or whatever
100%.
the case may be. So I think inherently small and independent business has a social bent to it. And I'm with you, Lisa. Like, I don't know anybody in that category of business who doesn't make a contribution to their community, who it doesn't have their door. Hey, if the community in need, absolutely, we're going to support. We'll give you some resources. We'll give you some time, which is also a
Right.
huge gift, right? We're going to make sure that our community stays healthy, which is why my heart is always in the small business, right? We can, there's the multinationals. We go shop at big things, and our money leaves our communities and goes to a family that lives in Arkansas. How do they don't have that same visceral attachment to what's happening in their neighborhood that the bricks and mortar place, or the even the small independent IT shop. We have one around the corner here. It's small. They've been in business for 20 years. They've got 7 employees, right? But they've recently bought a building in downtown. They've opened up part of it to the community. Like, they've got this
So
great.
they're really embedded.
Oh, totally there. Totally there. Right.
It always seems to me like we lump corporate business and small business together in this sort of criticism of for-profit businesses, but I don't see it the same way at all.
Not at all.
I think a lot of small businesses are really trying to build sustainable practices in, and just from their heart, right?
Yeah.
But not always fully aware of how to do that, perhaps.
No.
But just sort of intuitively doing it. We're going to open it up shortly for questions and contributions, but I wanted to just, before we do that, I wanted to just ask you, it seems we kind of hold these social impact entrepreneurs up on a pedestal a little bit. Should we? Are they worthy of that? Is there, are they more special than any entrepreneur?
Yeah, again, I guess it depends on the definition. Again, through my small and independent business lens, I would hold them all up, because I believe that there is an aspect of that kind of category of business that has impact and social implications. So I think that if you're going to put your neck out, whatever, put your resources on the line, try your idea out in a business environment, regardless of category, then huzzah, power to you. I think that's brilliant. Do you deserve? Yeah, I think you do. You totally do. I mean, it's an adventure to try out, like to jump out with my idea that I believe in, and I think about it as soon as I wake up in the morning, and it's the last thing I think about before I go to bed. That's why I think forums like this are great, and I think that we need to spend more time, especially on the impact side of things, as we're trying to figure out how do you do things, and what are the subtleties and nuances of making my business more socially conscious. How do we go about doing that? How can we foster discussions like this, and then support mechanisms like on the Edge program is great. Like Coaching Rise, you really see how people are really determined to have their business be more than about profit and loss.
Almost to a fault sometimes, where they actually need to make sure they're putting a little more profit in, or making sure they're retaining more of their profit for their financial well-being long term.
Yeah, because we still need to be here next year.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. There's no impact without some financial sustainability. Anybody have a question or a comment? You can feel free to unmute or type in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. Guzman, what would you like to say? Yeah, please.
Sure. Thanks. Mark, that was really wonderful to speak whatever you were telling us, that for me, that is really knowledgeable, like
Thanks,
what
Guzman.
I'm getting out of it. My question to you is like when we get started with our business, we normally try to get into the profit, right? So what should be the first thing or a second thing we should be doing to transform our business towards social enterprise? So what should be the first one or two things we should be start adopting?
So after you make money, you mean?
Yeah, that's
Okay. Right.
right. So we started making money.
Excellent.
So now
Good.
what
Congratulations.
should we start
That's
doing?
amazing. Good for you.
Okay, cool.
Well, and then so what's the first thing you should be doing?
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, that's a great idea too.
Easier, Mark?
Yep.
Yeah, sure. So I have a technology company. I'm helping businesses to build, launch, and scale their projects. So, for example, if anyone have an idea, I help them in developing that idea with my team, and then help them in launching that idea to the market, and then they can scale from there. So I already have few clients, and I do have in-house team who are working on all those ideas together with my clients. So
Great.
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 So, it again, this is where I read a university article about 6 months ago that had 31 different ways to evaluate a social enterprise. So you can imagine that it's a custom thing. But if you're building, launching, scaling projects, and that's your raison d'etre, that's why you're in existence. Well, who in your community could benefit from that resource, right? You have a team of people that are working for you right now. Chances are maybe some of them volunteer somewhere, right? Or there's a pet organization you see that maybe somebody has barriers to getting good food, or a barrier to homelessness, or there's an organization in your region that specializes in helping people with homelessness, right? And everybody's under-resourced. So if there are some of your specialty that you can share with a burgeoning organization, a not-for-profit, or even somebody who's maybe in a purpose-driven business that has a good social aspect that you appreciate, then it's like, okay, then maybe I can mentor them a little bit, right?
Cool. That sounds good.
Yeah, I think that there's never a shortage of people who could use support, and if you can bring expertise to that support, then even better. We all talk about, it'd be great if we had we were on a call a couple of weeks ago, and this came up about how can I get like sponsorship, and everybody thinks of sponsorship as money, but you could sponsor your time, you could sponsor your ingenuity, you could mentor somebody, or even provide a conduit so those companies who can get connected to some of the people that that can help them out as well, right? So you can sponsor people in different ways. You can help them out in non-monetary ways that are even more important than if you wrote them a check for a certain amount of money. That kind of thing. And especially if you're into building, launching, and scaling different projects, to have a way to grab this organization and turn it a little bit so they have a different view even of themselves, then Guzman, that would be a magical gift to bring to another organization.
Yeah.
You could start by first thinking of yourself as purpose-led or purpose-driven, and focusing on the 3 Ps first, right? People,
Yeah.
planet, profit. So you're sort of balancing those things, which is never a third, a third, a third. It's always a balancing act, right? But
yeah, but the big thing too is to create some space in your organization for those kind of things, right? We're busy, right? Socrates you know, this is 2,000 years ago, and apparently it was still a problem there. But Socrates said, beware the barrenness of a busy life, right? We're all really busy. But if we're just busy, then, you know, what are we doing that's fulfilled? What are we living for? Right. And so the other thing, to Lisa's point, let's create some space for it. You know, maybe we have a team.
Mark, what I was, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Guzman.
Yeah. So what I was thinking, like, I started thinking it from the few months back about all this, and that was the biggest reason why I joined this conversation today. I did some research on internet, like what are people are getting issues with, right? So I was thinking just to start with the Facebook group first, and then start inviting where I can contribute with my content, what we are building for them, right? So that is the first thing which I was thinking. So I started voluntarily getting help from my team members. They are writing the tools and articles for all of those guys who could be needing their help, because my main purpose is just to give through, like, giving them a content, the tools, what they gonna need just to achieve something. So
I love
is
it.
that something you can think of, like, is the right way to move on?
Yeah,
I love
absolutely.
it. It's great.
Absolutely.
Involve them.
And the big thing is, like, it's you know, it's got to be good in your heart, right? And that's
Yeah.
right. If it's not, if you're just doing it because you think you should, or it's tokenism, that's like the CSR thing, right? The
Corporate
it
social
really has to
responsibility.
be something that you and your team can be like, oh wow, this is great. Like we're really going to be making a difference as an organization here, and into people's lives that you're helping, right? Because the thing you have to be careful of is you don't ever want it to become across as disingenuous, right? That you're doing it to cover an angle or whatever the case may be. That's business development, and we can all do that, and we should all be doing that on a different level. But let's be straight about what our reasons are in this world, right? A, we're going to make business, but B, I want to help people, and this is what's close to our heart in terms of the project that we're working on the side right now.
Okay, cool.
Guzman, have you met Angad, who just joined the call? The two of you should talk. He's also trying to build purpose-led social enterprise focus into his tech business. So
cool.
Might be worth a conversation.
Sure.
So Pepper had a question around, bear with me, I gotta go back up. Pepper, do you wanna unmute and ask your question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the workshop. Hi, Mark. Hi. I'm
Hello.
sorry that I'm not on video. I know it's kind of hard when the person's not on video, but not today. It's Monday.
I'm having a bad hair day,
Bad
Pepper,
hair
but
day?
Lisa said you have to be on video.
Okay, thank you. So, okay, I guess I'll tell you a little bit more about myself real quick. I call myself a creative strategist slash marketing consultant, and I call myself now a social entrepreneur because I've decided to primarily work with those who are reducing inequality, which is the SDG 10, and also partnership 17. So I partner with them in order to enhance their message that reduces inequality. I know it's like threefold, but this is the only way that I could do it as a digital service. So I was wondering if you had any insight, suggestion, or anything else that I could do as a digital service. When I say digital service, I do graphic design, web design, but mostly a lot of it is just consulting, right? Like from my head. So I find that that's hard. I can't do, bio or eco things like that, right? Also, I think Elizabeth in the chat, she mentioned theory of change, and I had a question for that. I'm struggling with my theory of change, specific, and there's so many templates. I don't know if you could recommend just one. And that's my question.
We'd probably have to do a bit of a deeper dive, Pepper, but like, who's your customer like right now? Who is that you're looking towards on that?
I look at a lot of professors, educators, activists, therapists, and anybody that's working with accessibility. That's my target market, but I work with anybody that comes to me, but those are my primary clients.
Right. So say it in a different way. What obstacle are you trying to overcome right now?
Am I going in the right direction? Like, what I'm doing does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, yes. Well, I think that you're in a brilliant area right now. In terms of like overall awareness, we've got a couple people in Edge right now exploring in the BIPOC world of things. You know, there's so much need right now for companies to change their ways, to get over their systems, you know, their age-old systems that just aren't, you know, working anymore. They're not, you know, they're not keeping up with the civilization that we're purported to be a part of, right? So I think that you are actually really in a perfect position right now to help out the professors, the educators, even the business people as well. Like, you know, there's so many aspects of our
Mark, I accidentally muted you. Sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry, guys.
Wow.
I hit the mute by mistake. My apologies.
So wow, that was okay. I'm gonna have to talk to my therapist about that
and-
later in the week. I think.
Yeah, I know,
It's like
right?
mid dive. But I think if there could be some structure, Pepper, around how you can creatively apply that for professors, like is there some, you know, here's a checklist of things you should be looking for. As soon as you get into an organization that has any more than, you know, even 10 or 20 people, I think that there are some not barriers, but we get used to doing things the way we've always done them. You know, even, you know, you have, even in your, say you have a primary relationship in your life, like, you know, I always am amazed about, you know, you're trying to fix that thing. It's this device, and you've been staring at it for hours and hours and hours, and then a person just kind of walks by, flicks a switch, and it fixes whatever it is that you've been trying to fix for hours and hours and hours, and you don't know whether, like, you know, you want to hug them, and you're so frustrated, but you've made their life easier, right? And I think that there's a lot of blind spots in the areas that you've outlined that people need support of. So let's recognize what they are, and put some systems in place so that we can in a loving kind of way move people and the organizations that are working in forward, so that they can make the changes they need to make within their organization, because we need to do it in a conciliatory kind of way, right? You know, if we show up at the front door and tell everybody that they're wrong, even if they are, it makes your job more difficult to help them move their yardsticks. So I think that even, you know, even visually, like if you're on the graphic digital design side of things, I think there are quite a number of people who's, you know, in the process of maybe making over themselves, also need to make over the look and feel of their organization, right? Because a lot of the things that we're presented with are, even we were working with somebody last week, and they were doing a Canva, just doing a Canva design, and so they wanted to populate it with a bunch of they were kind of caricature-ish type cartoons, but Canva won't allow you to kind of put a multicultural face on all these different characters. You had to, they were all white or all black or all Asian, or you couldn't, even in an organization as big as Canva, you couldn't kind of have a diversity of characters within the design that you're trying to put forward, which I was a bit amazed at, but it's like, again, we're met with this every single day. So, you know, if you are going to, you know, part of what your marketing strategy is, Pepper, is to, you know, make your offering distinct, right? So that I know that if I want to get, you know, a certain kind of meal, I'm going to go to Mark's restaurant. If I want a certain kind of design, you know, Pepper's the best in the business, that you want to go talk to them about that, way we go, right? Did that?
Thank you, Mark.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then yeah, ask like the other thing that I find about entrepreneurship, generally speaking, regardless of category, is it's kind of a lonely business. You're even if you're like Guzman, you said you had a few, you have a number of people working for you. There's some things you can't talk to your staff about. My classic example in entrepreneurship is I can explain to anybody on the planet what a cash flow problem is. It's really difficult to explain to anybody what a cash flow problem feels like, right? That's just a whole other box of frogs. And so, as a dozen people on this call who are entrepreneurs say, we can commiserate, but don't ever feel like you're alone. Everybody, Pepper, like if you have questions, there are people out there who will be happy to help you kind of get some thoughts out. Because the other thing is, as entrepreneurs, we have a tendency to stew on things a little bit. But if you can take that thought that's always in the front of your mind and just put it somewhere on a page or give it to somebody else to hold on to, there's a whole bunch of stuff in the back of your head that can come forward once you get that space freed up again. And it's about communicating. It's about interacting with other people. It's about putting your ideas out into the world so that they can be flourished, but also you can look at them from different directions, different angles, right? Because just like trying to fix that little box with the one switch that the person fixed on the way by, it's like we kind of get trapped into our own perception all the time. And it's really great to work with an outside group, people or individuals who can look at your particular entrepreneurial venture and say, okay, what if you thought about this? And you're like, oh, that's exactly what I needed right now. So, networking itself, not so much, but if you can find some people who you connect with on a deeper level that you trust with your information and trust with the directions you want to take your organization or company, then keep foster them, have regular meetings. Don't call them when you think you have a problem. Set up a conversation with them on a regular basis so you get used to the fact that, hey, it's the second Thursday of the month. And this is the time that I call Mark on the phone and we have a conversation about these agenda items that I have in front of me, so I can put my thoughts out into the world.
Thank you.
I'm just going to raise it right now. Pepper, are you involved in the EDGE community at all? Because we do have a program where we help people who are at the point of building revenue, and it's called Rise. It's a program that Mark coaches in, and we are accepting applications right now. So if you're interested in applying, you'd certainly be welcome, any of you on the call. Elizabeth, you had a question about the theory of change. Do you want to ask your question?
Hello, everyone. I guess I'm struggling with coming up with my theory of change. My venture is providing people who are precariously housed, so people who are on social assistance, EI and ODSP, try to find affordable rentals. So my scheme is to work with homeowners who are overhoused and have a big heart and are interested in turning unused parts of their home into legal secondary units. And so my company would bring in a construction company to do all the work, and we would match the clients with the homeowners and so forth. And it would be geared to the income that the people on ODSP can provide, so $400 or $500 a month. So I guess my question is, what is the end goal? And it's not a just, but it sounds like a just. Is it just providing those who are precariously housed a place to live? Is that the end goal, or is it something more than that? Which is a huge one, of course, in itself, but is it to help them thrive in other areas of their life? Like, is it a housing first principle where we get them housed as the first step to building, other areas of quote unquote success in their lives, like being able to, get off ODSP or a social assistant someday, or, hold down some type of job or something like that. I'm just struggling with the end goal of this. It's
a great question. So and the Encompass work that we do, we spend a lot of time in housing, and the outcome that we sell to government is a reduction in interactions with government at expensive levels. So somebody who is experiencing homelessness, their health might be compromised because they're outside a lot. So they're accessing the statistics are actually phenomenal. So you're in a complicated thing. So is your barrier to housing your end result, or is it is your end result we want to give people a place to live and thrive, right? And I guess
I think it's the second is my end goal.
Right. Yeah. So then the theory of change is what's the top of the mountain, and then what's the thing you did just before you just got to the top of the mountain.
Right,
We're gonna
work backwards.
So we're gonna build our house, and ultimately once we figure out what we need in the house, in as much as the first thing you do to build a house is build the foundation. When you design a house, the first thing you do is build the roof, and then kind of everything from the shingles on down, because everything has to fit underneath that roof, right? Like the shingles have to be over top of the edge of the actual roof line a little bit, because you don't want water, so you can imagine same thing. I want people to thrive. So originally it's like, oh, do I just provide people housing? Well, just providing people housing for some people might be all they need. But if I want to thrive, then maybe that for me has a different implication. And this is, I spend a lot of time in the housing world, and this is where things become settled and nuanced. And a part of the dignity of providing people housing is providing them the housing that they need. It's not well enough that we, build a 50-unit apartment building and find 50 homeless people and shove them in there and say, well, we gave you a place to live, because they don't all need the same. That, some people can't live in a place where their front door doesn't open to outside. If it opened into a hallway, that wouldn't work for them, right? Some people need to have people living in their house. Some people need supportive housing. Hey Mark, have you taken your meds today? Like, and I need somebody to help me with that. Or have I eaten, today? Like, and I need some support with that. Some people don't need that at all. And so we need to have an array of housing potentials that will work. For some people, if I'm have somebody renovating part of my house so that somebody can come live in it, then it might be a very specific person that is applicable to, right? Some people might not, it's like the food banks, and they're getting a lot better than they used to be, but the food banks were a bit challenged because it's they'd be like, well, after you went through the whole process of that 8-page application, they'd be like, well, here's your box of food, and it's like, oh well, thanks, but there's ground beef in here and I'm a vegetarian. And the reaction often to the food banks traditionally was, what, like free food's not good enough for you? And it's like, well, it's not about that good enough for me. It's just, because you're getting it for free, then you shouldn't question it. It's like, no, but then that doesn't affix dignity to what we're trying to do, right? If we can accept people on the basis of their own humanity, then we need to provide options for people that are going to work for them in their current situations. And I'll spray my bias, like we are in a unbelievably affluent country, and to have homelessness and people who don't have clean water and people who don't have access to good food, I think is a bit of an abomination. And so how can we set up a palette from which we can paint that will provide anybody who has barriers to any of those things the proper avenue which they can get those needs met, right? And so it's a cool, I love the idea of what you're doing, Elizabeth. It's brilliant. So who's your customer? And you have more than one, right? You have a homeowner
Mhm.
customer that we need to,
Yep.
you know, so who's that candidate? And then,
Yep.
then once the accommodation gets built within their house, there's also a particular other customer who will find themselves happily ensconced in that residence, and that the vibrancy can be fulfilled as they move forward in the program that you're providing for them.
Right.
So
Thanks so much.
the other thing that I would also encourage you is if to figure out what say if there's some outcomes that you could do with that as well. If you're dealing with a particular cohort of people that are accessing government services, can you go to those government services and say, listen, you know, I know that Mark last year visited you 50 times, and I know that each visit costs you this much money. If I could reduce the number of times that Mark comes to visit you, is there an economic upshot for you to do that, right? Because everybody is under-resourced. So if there's a way that you can strategically build a decrease to their increase, because everything costs more every year, but if you can take their curve and do this to it, is there some of that you can realize as you move forward to help you with your progress, right?
Right. Great. Thank
Is
you.
it planned?
Sounds good.
Okay.
All right. Walter, you joined the call. I'm going to pick on you for a second. What are you working on and how can we help you?
Well, currently I'm a law student at Ohio State University. I kind of came upon this pretty serendipitously, just, looking for an event to attend. And so I guess you could help me. I'm not a lawyer. I can't give legal advice. That goes like double in Canada. But I will say, be mindful both of, sort of the legal standing of your company, and don't be afraid to, consult with attorneys, and especially with socially driven companies, there's a lot of attorneys that, will do pro bono services. If you reach out through universities, they'll have, clinics, I'm sure, in Canada that will be really just more than willing to help out with these kind of enterprises.
100%. It's an interesting thing here in Canada that we're not really set up to have separate structure for social enterprises. I don't know what it's like in the US. I think there is, right? Yeah. Anyway. Drazen, how do I say your name? What do you got going on?
Yes, hi. How's it
How
going?
can we help you?
Yeah, so I just joined. Actually, Pepper referred me to this program, so I figured I'd join because
awesome.
I was talking to her about some of the stuff that we're doing. So I run a digital marketing agency. We specialize on web development and search engine optimization here in the Greater Toronto area. So we work mainly with local businesses, and we've been doing this for about 14 years now. And about 3 years ago, we wanted to kind of shift focus towards the nonprofits and be in that space, just because we've been serving the local businesses for so long that we wanted to change. It's one of those things that I like to do as an owner, is just constantly grow and learn new things. So then we got involved with a nonprofit here in Toronto called Comer. They're the Committee on Monetary and Economic Reform. And they were just a think tank of people who were interested in helping change the economic system in Canada, specifically from a banking standpoint. And we just reached out to them and told them, look, this is what we do. Every business needs what we do, and we're willing to help you guys and volunteer. So we got involved with them in that way. And we're still working with them now. I'm not sure if you guys have much experience working with nonprofits, but there's too many people involved, and the progress is so slow compared to working in the for-profit sector. So really moving the ball forward, moving the pin forward is difficult and sometimes frustrating. They've lost a lot of members because of this, especially the younger members. And it's a lot of old people trying to make decisions about the internet, and a lot of fear. So there's really a lot of barriers, and they're scattered. They don't really know how to move forward. They know about some of the offline ways, but not the online ways. So we've been struggling in that regard, but it's very interesting. And we got involved with some other nonprofits, and we're volunteering for them as well. And really trying to figure out, what's the most important thing for them. It's not even building a website. It's not advertising that website. It's not running ads. It's basically helping them organize and build the systems that are going to enable them to grow, right? To scale, to actually reach that level where they want to be, which is, going viral, really, to make the biggest impact they can, rather than being these little local businesses. And so we've spent a lot of time on scaling ourselves, and that made a big difference. And this goes back to what Pepper asked about and what Mark suggested, to build a structure. And she was talking about how, her consulting is pulled out of her head. And, it's funny, in business school, they don't teach you anything about scaling anywhere. And so many business people know nothing about it, and they build these jobs instead of building scalable businesses. So really having that structure, having those systems, having those standard operating procedures, and focusing in on a couple of services, because the more services you have, the harder it is to scale. So that's one advice I'll give you, Pepper, just to think about those systems. And one really, really good and effective way to do that is to have a period of time. They say about 4 hours per week. Let's say every Thursday or every Tuesday and every Thursday, have 4 hours where you just focus on scaling. You shut off your phone. You don't answer phone calls from clients. You don't deal with emails, none of that. You shut off Skype, Slack, everything. And you're just focused on building these systems, and in the beginning, it's a little bit daunting and tough. And it's something to do with your team too, right? So we're doing this with our team, and it's really beneficial. And also reading a book called Scale by David Finkel. The book is really good, and I would highly recommend everybody reads that who's in business, because it's so underutilized. And we see it with our clients. 99% of our clients are small mom and pop shops that, things are in their head, and it's like if they die or if something happens to them, their business goes under, right? And you tell them about scaling, and there's so much resistance. They always say, "Oh yeah, you can do that with your business, but you can't do that with mine." And that's always the same thing they say. It's funny. And
it's good advice, Jason. I appreciate it.
Yeah, really good. Really,
Sure.
really good. Thanks. And you touched on so many things, like, non-for-profits always need help, but they also need to, be more business oriented, right? And the problem is that because the model that they're under is often, funding based, then the nature of their monies, their income, prevents them from scaling, prevents them from replication, right? Oftentimes there's so many rules because especially if the money's coming through a government agency, and of course, that's the public coffers, and you got to be able to say exactly what you do. And the problem with a lot of non-for-profits, they get some funding from the government to do this project, we need to go in this direction. But once they get into the project, they realize, actually, we should be going this way. And the government's like, well, no, you're not allowed to do that. The funding's for this, right? I want funding for this program to give mittens out to people who are homelessness or experiencing homelessness. And you get into the job and you realize, actually, they need socks too. And somebody's like, no, you can't. You're only allowed to give them mittens. You're not allowed, there's no funding. The funding doesn't allow for socks. But the other part that you touch on, and I think it's the important thing for scale, is for me, there's always two scales. There's bigger, so we scale and we get to be a bigger organization, but we can also scale and get to be a better organization, right? So that we have these two aspects, because it doesn't necessarily mean that we to scale we get double in size. Maybe we get twice as good as we were at doing what we did before, right? But the best thing about what you said is to take the time, right? So often we get back into busy mode, right? And we shouldn't let the urgent crowd out the important. And so to get into the habit of taking a period of time once a week for your team, that's brilliant. That you have this meditation where this is the time that we deal with this particular, that we set out to deal with this problem, to have this conversation, to put some ideas on the table. Brilliant. Can't go wrong. Like, and make it like written in stone. Like when we were talking to Pepper earlier about, hey, here's a mentor that you have, and every 2 weeks you talk to that person and you have their agenda, and we just put everything out on the table to help with our progress or to help with different ideas or to get me unstuck or whatever the case may be, dedicated to that time. Congratulations. I think, Drazen, you're doing things
And
that
Mark, that's what you're offering in the program, right? In the RISE program.
Yeah. Here, have a touchstone. And I think it's so funny, we get into the day-to-day, our day-to-day lives all the time. And you see this in personal relationships too, like where we just don't take the time to check in with each other to, are we doing the good thing? We've been doing it, like, how many times you hear that? We've been doing this the same way for 10 years. Okay, well, that's, I think, what the first thing we should look at is, you've been doing it the same way for 10 years. Is it good that you're doing it for 10 years, or is it just that you've been doing it for 10 years? That's always the way we've done it. Well, okay, great. But then what? Is there a better way to do it? Have things changed since you started doing it? Whatever the case.
I'm just
Yeah.
watching the time. I want to make sure that we leave time for anyone else on the call. Sorry, Drazen, did you have something else? I didn't mean to cut you off.
I'll be really brief. So I'm sorry, I kind of went on a tangent there. So my question
okay.
was with regards to funding for companies like ours when we're, helping sponsoring these nonprofits. Is there any funding to, that we can get from the government that will help us? Because there's only so much time and money we can invest ourselves to help them, right? So if we had funding from the government, our effect would be much greater, right? So I'm just curious about where we can go to get some details about that.
Depends. Yeah.
Yeah, it really there's through COVID, there's a thing called Digital Main Street that does provide a bit. It's smaller amounts of funding, but it's about how can you get your organization kind of onto the digital main street, and that might be something to look at. It's hard because if it's hard to get funding through into private companies, right? Because that the government doesn't mesh. So I think the operation would be to, how do we get funding into the not-for-profit that they can use to subsidize the work that you're doing for them, right? It might be a bit more of a challenge to get that direct line from your company to a government to fund you to work on behalf of a third party, but you could work with that not-for-profit to get them set up in funding, and they can use some of that funding to subsidize the work that you're doing for them.
I know there's also some funding for arts organizations. So if you are working with arts, anything in the arts, there's some funding specifically for the digital aspects of their projects. So that's like marketing, websites, all that sort of thing. So
the one I saw was on Digital Advisor Stream 2. Boost your business technology. You can be as a register as a digital advisor. So I'm not sure. I never tried that, but that could be the one.
What was it called?
I sent the link to you.
The link is in the chat there.
Okay.
Drazen, the one thing that I don't know, like it all depends on your business model, but if you're scaling up using freelancers, there's also funding available for hiring students. So if you were hiring, let's say, digital marketing students or graphic design students, there's funding available for that. And that comes out in February each year for hiring summer students. And then there's some again through, I want to say through the university and colleges, forget what the association's called. It's not my area at Edge, but we have staff at Edge that could help. So if there's any way within your business model that you can hire students, there's funding for that.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
kind of backwards, like bringing it in the back door instead to support the work that you're doing. But
yeah, so I mean, where would I go to get information on that? Because that's definitely an option.
So yeah, if you want to just reach out to me separately, I'll put my email address in the chat, and then I can connect you to the staff at Edge that will help you. Okay.
For sure.
AA or Paula, did you have any questions or
Winnie?
I'm good. I was coming in just kind of here being like the social enterprise and the nonprofit, just to kind of hear what other people were saying. And I actually got some good ideas, like how you were saying, Mark, about people sponsoring you, not just money wise, but with their services. So that's
Yes.
something that definitely we need to think about and talk about as we plan to scale and grow our organization nationally. So
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
called
yeah,
an
so they-
in-kind sponsorship. Yes.
Yeah, and they can sponsor with maybe, maybe their influence. People sponsor with their influence or their insight or their connections, or there's all kinds of resources out there, non-monetary resources that become as important or even more important sometimes than somebody who will give you 10 grand to do a certain project or whatever.
yeah, it's a more non-traditional way of looking at sponsorship, because whenever you think sponsorship, you think money attached to it, right? So I like that.
Well, and that's I mean, that's the another underpinning for impact for me is, how do we do things in a different way? How can we think about things in a different way? How can we approach this problem and apply some potential different solutions for it, right? How do we go about doing things differently? That whole, hey, it's always the way we've done it. That's in some areas that's just not working for us anymore. So how do we approach it? How do we approach a new angle on this to solve maybe an old problem?
Yeah.
I'm good. I know you've been working at building a little more impact into your organization. Do you want to talk about what you're doing? I know you're working with Mark already. And I know you have your little one there, so if it's noisy, it's okay.
Sorry.
I think you should bring her on. I want to meet her.
She's actually lying on the bed right now.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, and sorry, I was a little bit late. I literally I was on call with Mark before this, and Mark told me that it's at 5, and then I was like, okay, you know what? Let me jump on. Maybe he mentioned 5 EST because I'm in Central right now, so I totally missed that. That's why I jumped on a little bit late. But right now we are actually, I mean, there's different ways we're trying to make impact, right? Obviously, like by hiring people to support diversity, and and also like from the venture that we're working on, there's a couple of different ways that we're doing that. One, we're trying to make things more digital, so more environment friendly in manufacturing environment. So again, like it really depends on how you look at impact in many different ways. So there's a couple of different areas that we are touching, but definitely as we move forward, well, we're definitely going to be working towards that. It's always on our mind.
Well, and I like even the impact. You're in the manufacturing. How do we get people who are working at the shop floor and the people who are running the whole corporation to interact with to interact with each other in a meaningful way, right? And traditionally that doesn't happen, right? And and that has huge implications for the company, for the social fabric of the organization, for the mental health of the people all through the organization, right? That's invaluable. You're doing such great things. I get like it's it's a great way to, hey, how can we approach this? It's always been done that way. It doesn't have to be done that way anymore.
That's true. I appreciate you bringing that up. That's a great way of looking at it for sure. Because you're right. Like in manufacturing today, there's a big gap in communication that way. And as you mentioned, like it brings a lot of different, like it brings impact in a lot of different ways. So appreciate that. Yeah.
Mark, all these questions, all this input, it's a nebulous kind of thing, this social enterprise thing.
Yes.
It's
hard to argue.
It's kind of hard to rein it in and make it nice and clean and neat. I like to tie everything up at the bow,
Yes, yeah.
Doesn't always
You might be
work that way.
disappointed at the end of this call, then, Lisa, because it's for, you know, in a way that we're trying in a, you know, once we get on the social side of things, you were kind of in a way trying to harness our humanity, and it's not an easy thing to do, right? We're highly individualized beings, and similarly, if our businesses are a subset of us, then they are also like highly individualized, you know. So how do you quantify that? How do you measure it? How do you do progress? I don't know, but that's why, you know, back to the conversation with Guzman, like I feel that it's got to be something connected to what you believe in or what your values are, or something that you know gets you out of bed in the morning. Because if it gets on the disingenuous side of things, then it's a harder thing to sell, but it's a harder thing to stay motivated for. If you want to make that kind of difference, whatever kind of difference you want to make, it's got to be something that means something deeply to me, or I'm not going to be able to sustain it in the long run. Entrepreneurship is a marathon. We're not in sprints here. I mean, we have busier times, no doubt, but we are on a long gradual curve that, you know, to like I always say, you know, we're kind of putting together a never-ending jigsaw puzzle, right? We think we got the picture together, but then somebody gives us a few more pieces or takes away a few pieces, you know, and so we're always trying to morph this into a vision that we can kind of get a hold of, right? But that visceral attachment to what it is that we feel is important, I think, is key to the success of moving your organization into ways that can really change the world.
I think one of the things I love about entrepreneurs is that infinite creativity. Like, we are, as human beings, infinitely creative, and yet you see it most in the entrepreneurial mind, that way of looking at a problem and trying to come up with some new way to solve it, and never more than you see it with impact entrepreneurship. They're not like necessarily copying ideas, they're looking for the new, the different, the truly innovative. Okay, I have one final question, and I have to ask this because, you know, the work we do at Rise, it relates to this, but the question is this. It always seems to me that there's this impression that social impact organizations are, you know, they're kind of small and grassroots, and well, you know how I feel about that, but you know, can a social enterprise grow? Can we grow something to be like a large enterprise with lots of tentacles and lots of impact? Talk about that.
Absolutely. There's you know, organizations. Well, Patagonia, like, look at that. There's a crazy success story. They'll take any of their products back to recycle. They guarantee their products for life. They you know, take, I can't remember how, like a number of years ago, they took all of their profits and donated it to people who are doing strong environmental things. It's a huge company. And interestingly, though, they are not necessarily getting bigger size-wise. They are getting better at who they are as an organization. But they're an enormous company, right? And they're doing great things. Angut's company, when it gets to be like $1 billion corporation, he's going to do great things too. He told me that earlier on a call, just as a sidebar.
Awesome.
But yeah, I think there is. I think that I think fundamentally we need to be, you know, look at the state of our planet right now and our world too, environmentally, socially. It feels very yeah, good for them. Pepper just says Patagonia just left Facebook. It's like, you know,
quite a few doing that lately.
Well, and it's okay. So we don't have to do things the way they've always been done, right? And this is, again, you know, there's this we only get so big as people, right? We have I have a science background. We this growth stimulating hormone that we have more kids and we grow to, you know, our adult size. And then there's a growth limiting hormone that stops that from working anymore. And there's some people that exist every now and again that they don't have the growth limiting hormone, and they literally grow to 8 feet tall, and they die at a very young age because their heart explodes because it can't keep up with the size of the body anymore. And we need to become reconnected to our planet because our planet is only so big, and our current state of capitalism is keeping us from living within that limit, right? And I think that socially we're experiencing that, environmentally certainly we're experiencing that. And so we need to, through our impact, through our social entrepreneurship, need to adjust the way that we've traditionally done business, look at the way we've always done it, and come up with new ways that we can survive with each other, and we can survive on this planet and help each other out. And because again, we all need to be successful or nobody's going to be successful.
I love it. To me, that sums it all up right there. See, that's the nice bow I was looking for.
Yeah. Okay.
We all need to do it differently.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for being here today.
Yes, very much.
I think this was a great discussion, and kind of poked around at some of those issues as it relates to social enterprise. So thank you to each of you for joining, contributing, for being part of the discussion. That's what Mentor Mondays are for. And we encourage you, if you're looking to scale revenue, to take a look at the RISE program at Edge. Mark is the social impact coach there in that program. And the goal of that program is to help you grow, to help you create the foundation for your vision. So, thanks for being here.
And keep poking.
Keep poking.
Absolutely.
Thanks, everybody. Cheers.
Yeah.
Have a
Cheers.
good
Thank you very much. Have a good one. Bye.
Thank you guys.
Bye.
Take
Thank
care.
you so much.
Bye-bye.